This podcast is brought to you by North Carolina's electric cooperatives.
This is NC Spin, an unrehearsed discussion on issues of interest to North Carolinians. Now, here is your moderator, Tom Campbell.
Welcome. You've heard and read the spin the media and the politicians have put on the issues of the day. To get the correct spin on what's going on in North Carolina, let's introduce you to our panel of experts. They include Becki Gray, Vice President with the John Locke Foundation, Chris Fitzsimon, Executive Director of NC Policy Watch, Syndicated columnist and author John Hood, and political consultant Brad Crone. Well, we hope you had a nice 4th of July. This week we're going to ask our panel to discuss the recent legislative session, changes in state retiree health benefits, and new efforts to land major industrial employers to our state. And of course, we'll ask the panel to tell us something we don't know. Let's get started. As is traditionally the case, the last few days of the legislative session are hectic, filled with long hours, many changes, and bills hurriedly passed. Next week, we plan to provide a full analysis of exactly what the legislature did and didn't accomplish. But this week, we want to discuss some of the big news and trends from the session that began back in January. Brad, aside from the passage of a 2-year budget, what do you think was the biggest legislation passed by this session?
The governor vetoed a budget that gave state teachers and state employees pay raises. And that will be the hammer that the Republicans use to bang on Cooper's head for months to come.
All right, wait a minute. Explain that to me again. The governor vetoed a budget that gave teachers pay raises, but he was advocating much larger raises.
Yeah, but they're still going to come after him, and you've seen that repeatedly on the social media all week. Now, in return, the governor's out raising money as fast as he can in a C4 independent expenditure to try and break the supermajority. But I think the big story is going to be, the pay raises that were afforded to teachers and to state employees.
Becki, at the beginning of the session, the big discussion point was the repeal of HB 2. The legislature, after many weeks, finally passed a bill. Their critics said it didn't go far enough. We've had a few months now to see how this repeal has taken hold. What would you say has been the reaction?
I think it has, not much. I think what we've seen is HB 2 was a lot of fluff and a lot of noise for a long time that was really used as political ammunition through the campaign. And what we've seen, and I thought the General Assembly was absolutely right, finally Roy Cooper agreed to come on board with the repeal of HB 2 to just get that off the table so that we can talk about things, as Brad mentioned, things that are important to North Carolinians. Teacher pay, state employee pay, infrastructure, paying for roads, all of those things that North Carolina families want.
Chris, we talked about during the course of the session, discrimination and rights of individuals and so forth like that. Right before the July 4th break, the U.S. Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals came out with a ruling that said magistrates did have the right to refuse to marry same-sex couples. What do you think?
Well, actually, what they said was the people who sued didn't have standing, and they were careful to say they weren't deciding on the merits of the case. They were saying that the magistrates couldn't prove that these specific magistrates couldn't prove that they were harmed enough for this to be the case. So I don't know whether they'll appeal this. I assume they will, but I don't think you should misinterpret this as saying they think all magistrates don't have to marry same-sex couples.
Okay. But remember that's not even North Carolina's policy. North Carolina's policy is to allow magistrates who have an objection to not do that, be assigned to other duties, and then provide somebody else to. I think Chris is absolutely right to say this was really throwing a case out on standing, but the fact that they couldn't show damage is kind of the whole point.
Yeah, Brad, one of the things that we talked about a lot during this past session was redistricting. Of course, we had court verdicts, court rulings that said that both the congressional districts as well as the legislative districts were racially gerrymandered. There's talk that lawmakers are going to call themselves back into session later this summer, early this fall. Is redistricting going to be the topic of discussion? Will we see new maps?
Well, I think you'll see new maps. Redistricting will have to be addressed. I think you may actually see Justin Burr make an effort to have judicial redistricting as a part of the discussion with legislative redistricting.
I was going to say that was discussed, but it was killed right before the July 4th.
It wasn't killed. It was put on hold.
Yeah. I think you'll see a bevy of constitutional amendments amendments coming up too, Tom, during the special session. The real question, I think, too, is will there be special elections that the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals will mandate, and that's still up in the air at this point in time.
A lot of changes as far as the courts are concerned and the election of judges and how they're going to be designated and what order they're going to appear on the ballot and so forth like that. Chief Justice Mark Martin came out at the end of the session proposing that North Carolina essentially change the way we select judges. Instead of electing them, he proposes some sort of merit selection. You were on the study committee that reviewed all of this. Do you see this happening?
Well, it would be a bit of a stretch, to say the least, but the Chief Justice was arguing for what is called assisted appointive power, which is you would have some kind of commission, maybe formed by gubernatorial and legislative appointees, that would vet potential judicial appointments, and then some democratically elected body. Now, he didn't say the governor would appoint. He said somebody who answers directly to the people, that could be the legislature, would then actually choose the judges. Keep in mind that this is not common, but in South Carolina and Virginia, the legislature elects all of the judges. That is not an unlikely thing for some of the Republicans to be thinking about.
Brad, you tweeted about that and said you were not in favor of this.
I want to run the campaign. I mean, I'll beat the devil out of them, because basically it takes away the people's right to vote and lets the lawyers decide, and I doubt very seriously that voters are willing to do that.
Chris, we said at the beginning of this legislative session that we were all expecting that the legislature was going to pass bills, the governor was going to veto them, the legislature was going to come back and override these actions. Have there been as many of these cycles as we had predicted?
There's been vetoes on the big issues, and I expect that'll continue in the short session. It may even continue in a special session, although remember the governor can't veto redistricting bills. But the tone for this wasn't set. The session really didn't begin in January. It began in January. Yes. It began in December when they had a special session and they took power away from the governor. That set the tone for the whole year.
And that was one of the major themes, Becki. It seemed like there was a lot of political ploys made, particularly against Democratic elected statewide officials. We had Governor Cooper losing close to $1 million out of his budget. Attorney General Stein lost $10 million out of his. And right at the end of the session, we had a situation in which there was a proposal that Elaine Marshall be impeached. Purely political?
Investigated.
Probably
maybe
the
first step towards impeachment, but it was to set up an investigation. This started in December and it's gone back and forth. And every time the General Assembly does something, the governor or Josh Stein sues. I mean, there's just a pattern that's been established.
All right, so we said there were going to be at least one special session sometime this fall. I got a minute left. What issues do you think will be brought into these special sessions?
Has to be redistricting. The courts will give the instructions. Has to be redistricting.
John, constitutional amendments?
Possibly, and both of those would be related to the 2018 election cycle. I don't think special elections in 2017 are likely, but both of those events would affect the 2018 election.
Any other issues to be discussed during the special session that y'all are aware of?
No, redistricting, constitutional amendments.
We may see some economic incentive if something comes up, rumors about that kind of thing.
All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back after these messages, we're going to talk about state retiree health benefits to end.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
I hear it all the time. Rising health care costs are squeezing North Carolina families. Deductibles continue to climb, prescription drug prices are skyrocketing, medical bills are unknown until they arrive in the mail, and premiums are increasing by double digits. This is decimating family budgets. We should be focused on education and jobs, not EpiPen cost and medical bill errors. We need quality, affordable, and transparent health care for our families.
North Carolina has over 300,000 government retirees who depend on their pension. Since the 2008 recession, retirees have seen little or no cost of living increase, while inflation has increased more than 14%. Investing in our retirees is good for the economy. Every pension dollar generates more than $2 for your local economy. Tell your local and state elected official it's time to take care of our retirees and fund a cost of living increase.
Learn more at ncrgea.com.
North Carolina spends billions on uncompensated medical care every year. To learn how a North Carolina solution for covering the uninsured can help your county, visit careforcarolina.com.
We now return to NC Spin.
The state budget that passed had a provision that would end state retiree health care benefits for all new employees hired after the year 2021. Currently, the state health plan has an unfunded liability of about $42 billion, and it's estimated that health care insurance for retirees costs about $890 million per year. The state treasurer and the legislature have been debating ways to bring down that liability, but employee groups said this is going to have a very harmful effect in being able to lure teachers and state employees to work for the state. Becki, until 2025, any state employee who retired would automatically receive health insurance at age 60. In 26, the law was changed to scale those premium benefits based on the number of years an employee actually worked. This, however, drastically changes the employment agreement the state has had with employees. Was this the best way to reduce the reduce the liability?
You know, I think it is. Something has to be done. We have to be able to honor those commitments and pledges and promises that we've made to our current state employees. And in the introduction, you're exactly right. This would apply to new state employees. This would not be retroactive to any of our current state employees. And so, you know, the liability, the unfunded mandate with this, if we're going to provide these promises, we're going to have to do something to bring down the cost.
Help me with the math here, Chris. I'm trying to figure this out. If we're spending $892 million a year on employees that we've got, and we're going to, after 2021, not provide these benefits, how's that going to get rid of $42 billion worth of liability?
Well, it's not. I guess the argument would be that it wouldn't add to the liability, and we could figure out a way to chip away at it. And there has to be a lot of solutions. I was interested that State Treasurer Dale Folwell didn't take a position on it, which is one of the first times I can remember him not taking a position on something. I don't know if he didn't want to incur the wrath of state workers or not. But look, the big issue here, we just had a big economic boom.
Who, by the way, endorsed him in the
election. But we've had a big economic boom in North Carolina. Everybody here says the economy's been so great. We've had all these budget surpluses, and state employees have barely gotten a decent raise. So now we're not giving them decent raises. We're raising their health care premiums. We're starting to charge them for health care, the ones who have it. And now we're not going to give health care retiree to new employees. Now tell me how we're going to get quality state workers in the next 10 years to come to work in North Carolina, and teachers for that matter. We've always argued the benefits were the reason.
The problem is exacerbated, Brad, because it has been a well-known tradition that state employees were not making market wages to start off with, but they were receiving very fine benefits, particularly health insurance and the retirement plans. Are we going to have to renegotiate what we're paying state employees?
Well, to a certain extent, I think so, Tom. You know, I think the legislature looked at it from the perspective of you're in a hole, so the first rule of finding yourself in a hole is to stop digging. But also, you got to look at it from the perspective of the state's ability to recruit top talent to come in and do the positions. And you're absolutely right. They weren't competitive at the salary scales, but the benefits outweighed vacation time, sick leave, and your retirement benefits and access to health care.
Health insurance and retirement,
But the other interesting thing, you're seeing this across industry everywhere, where industry, big business is looking at defined benefit packages and saying we can't afford it.
Well, let's get to that, because it appears that the next domino to fall, John, might be on these pension and retirement plans. Currently, a state employee gets a defined benefit each month based on how many years he worked and what his highest last 5 years salary was. There's a lot of talk about changing that to a defined contribution plan, not defined benefit, but defined contribution, where the state and the employee put money in a pot. The employee has some say-so how he gets invested. Then, at the retirement age, the benefit is based on what the pot looks like. Motion on that? You think that's going to take place?
Possibly. Both the retiree health benefit and the pension benefit were designed long ago, when people's expectations were different. Essentially, state employees can be paid with cash right now, or benefits right now, or cash and benefits later. And the argument has been, we'll take cash and benefits later, please, because we will value it when we're older. We get all these it's tax-free in the long run. I think that more and more employees will want cash now. or at least benefits now, and I think we ought to adjust to that. And yes, that might mean higher state employee pay raises and less money put into, which is not even happening now, for the benefits in the future.
You know, I noticed that the legislative retirement system is several times more generous than state employee benefits, and I haven't seen legislation yet to change that.
And we haven't even discussed judicial or law enforcement or...
But the legislature could at least start the process by addressing their own generous benefits before they cut state workers.
But they're so underpaid that the benefit makes it worth being...
that's the argument we just... Becki, do you think there's any chance that this, even though it was included in the budget, this health insurance retiree provision might be reversed?
Sure, and it goes into effect, what, in 2021?
21.
So, I mean, there's certainly time to do that. But, you know, I think this whole discussion of how are you going to shore up the pension plan, how are you going to shore up the health plan, how are you going to do all this? Really, part of this discussion has to be if we rein in the growth of government and have fewer state employees, then we can take care of those that we have.
But with all that discussion, Brad, we were expecting something to come out of this legislative session that would start whittling down these huge unfunded liabilities.
It did not. And, you know, the pixie dust and the fairies are still trying to figure out how to put it all together. And so I reckon we'll wait until the short session or probably the session in 2019.
Another metaphor is that the peanut butter and the jelly need to start running out together. After these messages, we're going to talk about landing big industrial plants.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
The cost of everything has gone up dramatically over the last 75 years. With one exception, keeping electricity affordable. That's the power of your co-op membership. Learn more at togetherwesave.com.
North Carolina's Touchstone Energy Cooperatives, looking out for you.
I help educate and inspire visually impaired students to strive for a brighter future.
I make sure visitors to the North Carolina Zoo take a walk on the wild side.
And I make sure that the fuel you buy is a quality product from pipeline to pump.
I support small businesses in North Carolina by matching them with hard-working, well-trained employees.
I make sure the roads you drive on are safe.
Scenic, the one voice speaking in support of the men and women who are making North Carolina great.
You sleep on concrete till your body get immune to concrete.
My mom got my brother and I up and said, come on, we're leaving.
I became homeless in the beginning of this year.
When I was about 4 or 5 years old, our house caught fire.
I used to see my brother. If he see me, he'd turn and go the other direction.
We did the only thing that we could think of, and we went to a Salvation Army shelter.
You know, we don't have this, like, what's your background look like? We just say, what do you need?
I remember the man from the Salvation Army coming down with a box of clothes.
The Salvation Army officer bought my brother and I an ice cream cone.
Last week, my brother walked up to me, and he just started a conversation.
Today I've given my life to the Salvation Army because I remember what somebody did for me, my brother, and my mom over 30 years ago.
The Salvation Army for me means hope.
Compassion.
Family.
Support.
We now return to NC Spin.
For many years, economic developers have bemoaned the fact that North Carolina has largely been unable to lure large companies into locating in our state. According to the developers, the primary reason had been that our state was unable to offer competitive incentive packages to these big employers, sometimes called elephants, that make major investments. In the state budget that was recently approved, up to 25% of a company's state tax bill would be refunded for up to 25 years if the company hired more than 5,000 employees and invested more than $4 billion. John House Speaker Tim Moore says that our state is on the cusp of landing a major company that could hire as many as 8,000 employees, and this provision will help in securing it. Is this incentive package too large, about right, too small, and will it help attract new major companies?
Well, I dislike this type of policy. I have disliked this policy for decades. I will dislike it for decades to come. I'm consistent in my disgust about this policy. But to answer your question, Nobody really knows. This is the nature of the problem with incentive-type policies, is it assumes pieces of information that politicians can never have. And I just think it would be better to stick with generalized benefits, whether they're spending on the one side, for infrastructure improvements or whatever, worker training, or lower overall taxes, and try to get out of this business. But it looks like both parties just can't.
But Brad,
help
you
but be
remember
sucked
going
into
back
it.
to 1993 when Mercedes was in play, so to speak, in the state of Alabama, and just almost gave them the key to the Treasury. But we lost BMW, we lost Volvo. Is this going to work?
Well, Tom, I can go even further back to 1982 when Locke Fairclough was the Commerce Secretary, and they were implementing the first rounds of incentives, and that was really new policy for the state of North Carolina. We've been doing it. I understand John's argument and his displeasure in not liking it, but I believe you have to do it to be competitive with the Commonwealth of Virginia, Tennessee, and South Carolina and Georgia. From a regional standpoint, I think it's a necessary devil.
We heard these rumors, and Speaker Moore seemed to confirm some of them. But a lot of times, many of them are just that, just rumors. With the House Speaker talking about it, can we consider this a pretty real prospect?
I think we can consider this a pretty real rumor. That there is a big company that I think that I'm sure the folks at Commerce and legislative leadership know who it is and they were trying to get. If it was close to being done, I think we would know.
Well, it wasn't even kept a secret. The name of the company was leaked.
Right. Well, we've known the name of the company before, and we've mentioned some of them here. This isn't a good policy. I mean, I think the best incentives are some of the things John mentioned: investing in roads, investing in transportation, in broadband, and worker training, community colleges, the school system, the quality of life, and all those things. But it is worth noting, I have friends who were recently in Greenville, Spartanburg, South Carolina. They just celebrated the 25th anniversary of the BMW plant, and whether it's a good policy or not, the folks down there will tell you that it's transformed a giant piece of South Carolina.
Well, Becki, I was going to ask.
Is that why they went there? I mean, I guess that's
Yes,
the question.
It is.
The incentives.
Yeah, BMW went to South Carolina, Spartanburg, because of that very fact. Let's say the state, Becki, is successful in landing this big elephant, this big plant. It's obviously going to provide a tremendous economic boost to wherever it ends up. But how much impact is it going to have on the rest of the state?
Well, that's a hard question to answer because we don't know what it is, what it would
particularly
be, what
in rural
kind of,
areas,
is it a manufacturing site? Would they hire North Carolina workers? Would they bring workers in from other places? What would an average salary look like? All of those kind of things. I mean, we don't know, and to speculate this, I think that's the problem with using these incentives.
But specifically, we need to worry about these rural areas, do we not?
Absolutely, and the policymakers are still trying to get their feet underneath them, in particular in the Department of Commerce and the operational Economic Development Corporation that they have, the public-private partnership. The Chief of Staff to the Secretary of Commerce went over and spoke to Democratic caucus about the rural divide, and they are still developing policy.
Chris, is it possible that we could have a similar economic impact spread throughout the state if we offered similar benefits? I agree with John, I'm not real thrilled about economic incentives, but if we offered similar benefits to medium and small businesses with tax forgiveness.
Well, I guess so. I mean, you'd have to have a lot of them to get as much as a big whale, but I still would rather invest in the people and the institutions we already have here. And most companies, I think, would rather come to a state that has a high quality of life. They have workers that are ready to work. They have the transportation infrastructure, the broadband infrastructure. There are a lot of things we can do that don't require favoring one business over another.
Yeah, but again, you talk to the people down in Greenville, Spartanburg, and they'll tell you the quality of life came.
To take that to an extreme, I mean, why not just take the $23 billion that we just allocated through the budget and just, put it in pots around the parameter of the state and let people pick it up as they come in here? I mean, come on.
There's a thought. Don't mention this to the legislature.
Yeah, and not pay for roads, not pay for teachers, not pay for community colleges.
Don't mention this to the legislature. They might want to attempt it. Well, after the messages we have coming up, we're going to ask the panel to tell us something we don't know.
NC Spin is brought to you in part by the North Carolina Farm Bureau. The Farm Bureau and Agriculture. We keep North Carolina growing.
North Carolina has over 300,000 government retirees who depend on their pension. Since the 2008 recession, retirees have seen little or no cost of living increase, while inflation has increased more than 14%. Investing in our retirees is good for the economy. Every pension dollar generates more than $2 for your local economy. Tell your local and state elected official it's time to take care of our retirees and fund a cost of living increase.
Learn more at ncrgea.com.
The healthcare landscape is filled with questions and uncertainties of changes that are coming. In these times of change, there's one thing you can trust. You can trust your family physician to work for you, not only in treating sickness and disease, but also your overall health. Regardless of how healthcare might change, the men and women of the North Carolina Academy of Family Physicians pledge to work upholding your trust. Family physicians, your trusted healthcare advisors.
12,000 North Carolina veterans are uninsured with no options to buy health insurance. They fought for us. Now let's fight for them. Let's create a North Carolina solution for covering the uninsured.
To learn more, visit careforcarolina.com.
I help educate and inspire visually impaired students to strive for a brighter future.
I make sure visitors to the North Carolina Zoo take a walk on the wild side.
And I make sure that the fuel you buy is a quality product from pipeline to pump.
I support small businesses in North Carolina by matching them with hard-working, well-trained employees.
I make sure the roads you drive on are safe.
Scenic, the one voice speaking in support of the men and women who are making North Carolina great.
We now return to NC Spin.
Now comes the time when we ask the panel to tell us something we don't know. John Hood, I'm going to start with you.
Tom, update to a previous show. Some time ago, I said that the University of North Carolina system was embarrassingly low in its protection of free speech on campus. I'm pleased to report that there have been substantial improvements across the system. North Carolina now has the most universities of any in the country that have the highest rating in free speech protection on campus. That is a significant improvement in just a few months.
Interesting. Brad Crone, tell us something we don't know.
1982, Tom Gilmore from Guilford County ran the campaign, keep the 2-year term, beat the referendum on 4-year terms 64-36. North Carolinians don't like giving up their right to vote.
Oh, okay. Becki Gray, tell us something we don't know.
Tom, often in these legislative sessions, we see issues that are addressed, but as we look at them closer and unfold them, they become much more complicated. That's why studies are good. A good example of this session is going to be a study on the human trafficking problem that we're seeing across North Carolina. Kudos to Representative Bill Brawley for
we're one
really,
of the top 10 states in the nation.
And we need to
human
get that
trafficking.
right. We need to find solutions, and we need to get it right.
Chris, tell us something we don't know.
2 nominees for dumbest budget provisions. One is by, in the effects of Stanley Community College. It forbids the culinary program from teaching culinary arts off campus. Apparently a local representative was mad that there was a culinary school meeting not on campus. The second one was a downtown revitalization grant given to an unincorporated area in Rutherford County that does not have a downtown. That was part of the $100 million in the last second money that was given away to show you how ridiculous.
We'll be finding those things for months. Well, you've heard our spin on the issues of the day. To stay informed all during the week, give your feedback and read my weekly column, visit our website, ncspin.com, or catch NC Spin on Facebook and join us next week when we're going to summarize the 2017 legislative session with more balanced debate for the Old North State. Until then, stay informed and watch out for the spin.
Join us next week and get the spin on issues facing our state.